In Lesson 5, we're going to be subtracting fractions with unlike units or unlike denominators. The fraction equation that we'll be working with today is 1/2 minus 1/3. And you can tell that in looking at our denominators, we are subtracting 2 and thirds, so halves and thirds. And if we're thinking about it like our student and teacher problem, we have to remember that our denominators or our units have to be the same before we can perform the operation or before we can subtract. Steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 remain the same from your adding subtraction, and you find your like denominators or your common denominators in the same way. So we're going to start here with step 1, drawing our rectangular fraction models. One is going to have vertical parts and one is going to have horizontal parts. My first fraction is 1/2, and remember, you always want to make sure that you start with your first fraction, because in subtraction it matters what you start with. It matters what your first whole is, because you can't take away parts that aren't there. So my first fraction is 1/2. I have 2 parts in my whole, so I'm going to draw my 2 parts. And then I have one of those parts. So I will show that by shading in one of those parts. Okay. And then I'll go over to my second fraction model. And this fraction model is showing 3 parts, and these parts I'm going to do horizontally. So I'm going to draw these 2 lines, which breaks my whole into 3 parts. And my numerator says that I have one of those parts, so I'm going to draw that in here. And so that's showing that I have 1/3. So I'm going to show my equation here. So I have my rectangular fraction of 1/2, and I'm going to be taking away this 1/3. But I can't take away these parts from each other because they're not alike. They're not the same size. So I have to ask myself, how can I make them the same size? How can I change them so that I can do my equation? Where step number 2 comes in, we're going to partition our rectangular fraction models into equal size parts. And the easy way that we do this is this first fraction model. We have that one line, and we're just going to do that one line down the middle of our second. And that leaves us with 6 parts in our whole. And then we're going to take these 2 lines from our second fraction model and put them into our first one. And we want to make sure now that we have the same amount of parts, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we have 6 and 6, which are like units, and we can subtract like units. So let's fill in how many parts we have in our first whole. And that's 1, 2, 3. So we've rewritten 1/2 as 3/6, and we're taking away 2 parts out of 6, or 2/6. Now, it is very important, just like in our addition, that we keep track of our whole. If both of my fractions have 6 parts, I need to make sure that my end fraction, my answer, also has 6 parts so that all the parts are equal. Now, subtraction is a little bit different. Because we're taking away this second fraction from this first fraction, it's a little bit different. So I like to kind of cross off the fractions. So I start with my whole, and I'm taking away this one. So I cross it off here, and I cross it off here. So basically what we're doing is comparing these 2. And then I cross off this one, and I also have to take it away from this one. So what I'm left with is 1 fractional part. And so I would fill that last fractional part here in my answer. So when I go to write my answer, I still have 6 parts in my whole, but I only have one of those parts left. So Just like in addition, the denominator stays the same because our whole stays the same, and I subtract the top part. So 3 minus 2 is equal to 1. Last step is step 5, and you're going to ask yourself, can I rename to a larger fractional unit or make a smaller denominator by removing some lines? In this case, I can't, because if I erase any of these lines, I'm not going to be left with one full colored in unit. And in order for that to work, you have to have a full colored in unit. But here I just have one, so I cannot rename my fraction to a smaller denominator or larger fractional unit. So my answer here is 1/2 minus 1/3 is equal to 1/6.